on the UK transition and data protection. We're just waiting for one more person because there should be 5 of us here today. So before they arrive, first question is, can you hear me loud and clear? In the little chat functionality in the clip meeting area, you've got a little chat functionality. Just plop a hi, can hear you, hello, whatever in the little chat box as proof that you can hear me loud and clear. Excellent. Thank you, Emma. Brilliant. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Vava. Marvelous. Excellent. The next question then is can you see the presentation clearly? Right now, there should be a little slide up that says Techie Bits with a picture of the user interface and some wording. Can you see that perfectly fine? Marvelous. I love it when technology works. When we ran, because we were running a series of webinars, and when we did one a little while ago, it just wouldn't work. For all sorts of reasons, it just wouldn't show me, wouldn't show my presentation, nothing, just didn't want to know. So I love it when it works. So, technical bits, if for whatever reason it does want to play up today, and you do get kicked out and can't get back in again, then drop me an email. What I'm doing is recording this presentation. It's not recording you or any of your questions or chat. It's just recording me and the presentation, and that's it. So at the end of the day, I'm going to give you access to that regardless. But if for whatever reason you do get kicked out, you can't get back in again, but there were some questions that you had, then we can set up a little one-to-one session. That's absolutely not a problem. If you want to ask questions, you can either unmute yourself via clicking on your little icon of you. So on you, there's a little functionality to turn your camera and microphone on and off. Choice is yours. There should be, I've not blocked them anyway, so you should have the functionality to turn them on and off as you please. You can also use the chat functionality to raise a question as well. You can also press the little hand at the bottom right hand side, and that's to raise your hand, and it just lets me know that you want to ask a question. So I'll stop what I'm doing and answer the question accordingly. If at any point you, for whatever reason, you stop hearing me loud and clear, or something disappears, or whatever else, then again, just let me know in the little chat functionality and let me know at what point it stopped. Because what I can do is, once it starts up again, just repeat that bit for you. That's absolutely not a problem. So, what are we going to look at today? The purpose of this session is to take you through what's going on with Brexit or the UK transition and data protection. There's lots of myths out there around what is happening, what is not happening. So I'm going to take you through what the sort of things that are going on, what sort of stuff the government's done already, what sort of things you'll need to do post the 1st of January 2021. At the end of the session, you'll also get a PDF copy of the slides for you to take away and keep for your records. And once I've edited the video and uploaded it, I'll also send you the link to the recording as well, so you can refer back to it should you miss anything. That's absolutely not a problem. So what I'm going to do is take you through what's going on right now, what a signed trade deal means versus what no deal means, and the things that we need to consider, what sort of things you'll need to go away and look at, what further resources are available to help you, and all those sorts of things. We can take questions at the end, but if you've got questions we're going through, more than happy to answer it, more than happy to respond. That's absolutely not a problem. So my name is Scott Sammons. I own a company called Lighthouse IG, and I've been training on all things information, data protection, cybersecurity with the Essex Chambers of Commerce now for about 3.5 years. I set up Lighthouse IG about 2.5 years ago when I went freelance. But before then, I was with Essex County Council, and we had a training arrangement with the Essex Chambers of Commerce to train local businesses on their requirements under the GDPR, which I then picked up when Essex did its usual restructuring nonsense, and I picked up as part of my going independent. So I'm qualified in data protection, all the open government pieces of law, cybersecurity, information and records management. I also do work internationally. So I've been given an honorary fellowship of the Institute of Information Management Africa. Up until May of this year, I was the chair of the Information and Records Management Society for the United Kingdom and Ireland, and I'm now their lead on all things accreditation and certification. I'm based in Chelmsford, in Essex, so I'm coming to you from Chelmsford, just a little bit up the road from the Army Navy roundabout. And I've been in Essex pretty much all my life, born in Orsett, in the old Orsett Hospital before it was knocked down. That ironically has been now has been turned into a sexual health clinic. So that's that always makes my mum laugh. I also write. I'm a part-time counsellor and volunteer for a couple of local charities, helping them out, helping people with their mental health, and an avid Trekkie, as you may have noticed from my Darth Vader mask and various other bits and pieces, including some Star Trek models up there. So that's me. My company, Lighthouse IG, we do all sorts of things around workshops, training, practical skills on things like marketing management, project management, considering privacy impact assessments. We do reviews, audits, workshops, all those sorts of things. And we've been doing that for a little while now. So we provide and support a number of clients across various sectors, either one-off bits of work or ongoing support, outsourced data protection officer, that sort of thing as well. And as you can see, totally on brand, because I've even got my little lighthouse artwork in my office. Sad, don't get out much. So that's me. What I now want to know is a little bit from you. So what I want to know is, who are you? What industry are you from? And if there's one thing from today, what would it be? So this is where we're heavily reliant on technology. So if you're able to unmute yourself and talk, I would encourage you to do so, just so I know who you are and where you're from. So if there are some particular things I can tailor to your industry, I will do. But if there is then one burning question that you've got, one challenge that you're facing, or something that you want further information on, again, I can look to factor that in as well, so that if it's not already on the agenda, I can make sure that it's in there. So up first is, according to my little A to Z, Emma. If you're able to unmute yourself and say hello, please do. If not, write in the little chat box saying it doesn't work and respond in the little chat box. No worries, Emma. Fab. And if there's one, so Emma's in a shared office and is a translator. And if there's one question from today, Emma, what would it be? Or one topic, one area that you would like specific information on, what would it be? So Emma said, we've been struggling to get information about handling data when we translate birth certificates. Okay. So a little bit more about, so what I'll do is take you through what the requirements are with regards to international transfers. But if you want some more information, I'll also remind you what the basic principles are, what the basic requirements are for handling data, and how they don't really change post-Brexit. So we'll go through some of that as well. And then if you've got any more specific questions about there's something that's specifically that you need to do, we've got the questions bit at the end, so you're more than welcome to use that time for that as well. That's absolutely not a problem, because I think everyone might benefit from that. Excellent. Lovely to have you with us, Emma. In my A to Z, I noticed that Caroline has snuck back in. So I'm going to jump back up to see. So Caroline, if you're able to unmute yourself and say hello, please do. If not, in the little chat box, say who you are, where you're from, and if there's one question from the day you want answered, what would it be? Oh, can't pick up Caroline. I'll come back to you, Caroline. In that case, then, Michelle, if you're able to unmute yourself and say hello and where you're from, and if the one thing you want from the day, what would it be? Please do. Otherwise, pop it in the little chat box and we'll respond accordingly.
Hear me?
Hello, Michelle.
Hi. I'm a IT data administrator at the moment, but I've been covering GDPR.
All right, yeah.
I just really want to, obviously it's coming up with Brexit, and obviously when we're meant to be finally cutting ties, obviously it's data transferring is probably my main thing that I want to hear out today, really. So that would be my main point of joining the training today.
Okay, brilliant. We'll definitely.
We're an international company. We manufacture electronics, so.
All right, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, brilliant. Yeah, definitely on the agenda. Thank you for coming along. Good to have you with us. Next up, then, is Vava. You can, if you're able to unmute yourself, please do. If not, again in the little chat box, say who you are, where you're from, and there's one thing we want from today, and tell me if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Caroline. Good morning, Caroline. Export Sales Coordinator at Cantel Medical. Oh, brilliant. Fab to have you with us. No worries, Caroline. It has been playing up recently. It's one of those things of during lockdown, I think most of our technology has been struggling lately, especially training portals like this. If you do struggle, Caroline, just let me know. More than happy to repeat anything that goes a little bit funny or a little bit crackly. Morning, Vava, Compliance Officer for Insurance. Oh, fab. Brilliant to have you with us. And no worries. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I've used Click Meeting for about 6-9 months now, and I have to admit I'm not impressed with it. So once my license has come to an end, I'm probably going to change it. It's not been great. Cool. Okay, Caroline, if at any point the sound does go very crackly and completely subverts what you can hear from me, please do let me know and just say, sorry, Scott, can you just repeat that point? Absolutely not a problem. Right, I think that's everyone. There is another person dialed in from an 01702 number, but it doesn't say who they are. So if you've dialed in as opposed to... Actually, no, I do know who that was. No, never mind. We'll move on. That was you, Caroline, I believe. There we go. Brilliant. Fantastic. Let's crack on then. So where are we as of right now, as of today? What's what? So the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, is an EU regulation that is supported by the UK piece of law known as the Data Protection Act 2018. The Data Protection Act 2018 doesn't implement the GDPR because the regulation applies directly to all member states. So while we were a member, and even now during the transition period, while it's accepted that EU laws apply directly, because the whole point of the transition period was to give the British government time to lift and shift laws that they wanted to migrate across to the British legal framework, because that's very much the government's approach, is to lift and shift as much as possible so that it's that way then there's less disruption for businesses. So the laws are very similar. There's just a UK version of the law rather than an EU version of the law. So that's been going on during the last few years, both the previous government and this one. So therefore, the Data Protection Act will be our piece of legislation going forward. And that was very much designed to support the implementation of the GDPR. Now, that's been edited as part of a regulation that's gone through Parliament to make it so that there'll be the EU GDPR and there'll be the UK GDPR. And they very much say exactly the same thing. So again, if anyone says to you, oh, GDPR goes away because of Brexit, it does not. The government has already put the GDPR into British law. Therefore, if anyone says that, to put it bluntly, they're an idiot, because that's not how it works. That's not what's gone on. This is already British law. It's already part of our legal framework. Therefore, it's not going away post-Brexit. Now, a few years down the line, once things have calmed down a bit and the government's reprioritising what laws it wants to change and update and whatever else, maybe that's an academic discussion. But for right now, for the purposes of the 1st of January 2021, when officially we are completely out of the EU, the GDPR is very much here to stay. Data protection as a piece of law and as an enforceable piece of law is very much here to stay. And that's for a number of reasons, including the fact that Britain or the UK has had data protection law in place since the 1980s. It's something that we led on. We've always led on. We've always set standards for. The Information Commissioner was widely accepted around Europe as being quite good, quite proactive, quite helpful, and quite pragmatic with various sectors that face different data protection challenges. So for all sorts of reasons, the UK is unlikely to get rid of data protection. It's just not likely to happen. There are all sorts of areas of law that support it. There are all sorts of government departments, industries, whatever else that all think it's a good idea. And fundamentally, that's where the world is going. Since the EU implemented the GDPR, various other countries that have data protection laws have migrated their laws to replicate the GDPR in some form or another. Even new countries that didn't have data protection law in place, like places like Ghana in Africa, the California Act, Privacy Act in the United States, various other countries that beforehand didn't have any data protection related law, they are modelling their laws on the GDPR. So the UK would be politically hard pressed to walk a different path. Also, a lot of businesses are still planning to stay in the United Kingdom and use that as some sort of springboard into the rest of Europe. So again, from a business point of view, if you're working pan-European, having one set of laws here, but a completely different set of laws in the EU, which you're still bound by, or will still be bound by, because you're offering goods and services to EU citizens, then it makes no sense either. You're just making more barriers and more hurdles for businesses, for organizations, whatever else. So for all sorts of reasons, practical, political, historical, legal, it's just unlikely to go away anytime soon. So bear that in mind should anyone say, oh, it's disappearing, don't worry about it. It's really not. So at the moment, the main ways in which Brexit will affect data protection are in international data transfers. Everything else remains pretty much the same. The rules, the grounds of processing, they need to be transparent, privacy impact assessments, all those sorts of things remain the same. However, in the area of moving data in and out of the UK, in and out of the EU to the UK, and internationally, there will be some disruption. there will be some issues. So what I'm going to do is take you through what the requirements are at the moment, so what we're expected to do under the GDPR anyway, and then what the effect is and how that changes post 1st of January or the 31st of December 2020, once we've officially left. So at the moment, if you want to get data out of the EU, out of the UK, then you can do it via a number of ways of doing it. First one is an adequacy decision from the European Commission. Second one is standard contract clauses, so you get that third party based in India or whatever to sign a contract. And number 4 is to have your internal legal framework, so your internal contracts amongst your entities, your international entities, to have all those contracts approved by all 28 regulators, or an exemption. So for example, you've got a staff member that's emigrated to Australia, and they've asked for their employee personnel file. Fine, if they've consented to that, the person that's asked for it's happy with that, fine, you can send it to Australia. You don't need to worry about faffing about with anything else. So there are different ways of doing it. In terms of an adequacy decision, so looking more closely at each one, in terms of an adequacy decision, the way this works is that the European Commission will look at that country and determine whether or not it's a safe country to send personal data. It will look at things like, well, is there a law in place? So do their laws replicate ours? So do they have laws and rights and civil freedoms, and do they implement the rule of law? Do they follow criminal justice principles? Do they have an independent judiciary? Do they have elected members of parliament? All those sorts of things that would enshrine citizens' rights in their own laws, so that if I was to move your entire medical file from the local server at your local GP's practice to a server in, I don't know, Canada, does the Canadian legal framework in its entirety support and protect that data? If it does not, and there are other things infringing it as well, then it's unlikely to be a safe location to send stuff. You'll have to put other things in place to protect that data because the country itself won't, or is deliberately out to get that data and misuse that data. So other things that we'll look at is international commitments. So for example, what are the things, so if we take America, for example, yes, they have the rule of law, yes, they have a democratic country, blah, blah, blah. But the US Patriot Act gives the NSA and security agencies rights over your data as a UK citizen that you can do nothing about. There is no power of redress, you have no legal power to appeal that decision, and you may never know that the NSA has ever accessed your data at all. Now, as far as European governments are concerned, even the British government, they deem that unfair. It's well, what gives you the right to spy on our citizens? If anything, we're the government. We should have the right to spy on our own citizens, thank you very much, not you. So it throws up loads of issues. That's why Germany don't like the US. Various other countries around the globe at the moment don't like the US because of its wide-ranging and intrusive surveillance powers that those countries and those citizens have no legal power of redress over at all. We'll also look at the international commitments. So again, if we take America as an example, they are signed up to, or they are part of the Five Eyes international surveillance sharing system. So us, the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and there's 2 more now as well that have joined. So technically it's 7. They share intelligence on people amongst each other based on what they learn. So already there's an international commitment to share information on people that, again, you may never know about and you have no legal powers of redress over. India has the same sort of thing. So if we whack India through those sorts of requirements, the rule of law in India often doesn't apply. There are large parts of India that are deemed to be lawless because the government doesn't have any power over, or there's widespread corruption. India has also been accused by, I think it's the UN and various other nations as well, including the EU and the UK, of saying that your watering down of the judiciary is undemocratic. There's also accusations of corruption in the last election, all sorts of things that just cast a shadow over their democratic processes, including no privacy laws whatsoever. So while they tried to introduce one a little while ago, because they applied, I think, for the 3rd time to get a trade deal with the EU and be seen as adequate. And again, both the EU and the British that was part of that process said no, because there were lots of things in place that just conflicted with that trade deal. That again, India is seen as an unsafe location because there's just no protections for the data that's sent to them. Their government can access, just like the US government can do, can access it at any given time. They've got a national power like China does to force organizations to hand over data. And again, you as the customer, you as the data subject would never know about it. They also look at then the independence of the regulator. So this lovely law that you've got, if you do then have a data protection law, is it actually enforced? Can people go to the regulator and complain or say that something's not right and challenge what someone's doing? And if you can't, then again, that's a big cross in the box. But if a country has been given adequacy status, then you, as the data controller, you as the organization that's looking to outsource something or use a provider in another country, don't need to do anything else other than make sure you've got a valid contract. That's it. So all you need to do is check that they're on the adequacy list. And if they are, so if I want to use, for example, a provider in the Isle of Man, fine. They're on the Isle of Man, don't need to do anything additional other than make sure that I've got a decent contract with them. Okay, marvelous, done. Same for Canada in certain sectors. Switzerland, Jersey, Guernsey, Andorra, Israel, Argentina, Uruguay, New Zealand, Japan, although that's currently ongoing, but Japan will be very soon. And at some point, when we leave the EU, the other EU 27 member states will then look at that list and determine whether or not the United Kingdom is on that list. As we will no longer be a member, therefore, if we're not a member, we become an outsider. So we join everyone else, like Canada, Argentina, Brazil, blah, 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 blah. Therefore, according to the GDPR and data protection law, the Commission, the EU, has to decide or issue an opinion as to whether or not we are adequate or not. And I'll come back to that, because there are certain things that are challenging that. The other way of doing it is to get that provider to sign a template contract. So on top of your contract that you have with them, they need to sign an addendum that's what's known as a standard model contract clause, or SCCs, SMCCs, because everyone loves an acronym. This is a bog standard contract that's issued by the European Commission. So it's not something that your provider can go, oh, you're being really annoying with me, or anything like that. It's very much a template contract. You just fill in the details that's relevant to you, and that's it. That's about it. But it's designed to basically say, right, you entity, you don't have a national law in your country that protects this data. Therefore, legally, I have to see you as unsafe. So therefore, you, specific entity, so Payroll Limited, based in, I don't know, America or India, you will sign up to these standards. And these standards are basically an exact copy of the old European Data Protection Directive. So it binds them to European data protection law via a contract. So that's why it's generic, because it's literally a like-for-like copy of the old directive. Binds them to certain principles, binds them to security, binds them to a principle that they tell you if they receive a request from authority for your data, all those sorts of things. It's not quite as strong as a national law, but it's close. It binds them to some sort of legal protection for the data that you're looking to store with that third party. You can edit the template yourself. It's available from the ICO's website. So if you go to ico.org.uk, there's an entire section there on international, and you can download the templates from there, which you can very easily edit. You don't need to be a lawyer to edit them. It's just what are you doing? Who are the parties? And that's about it. Beyond that, it's fairly easy to use and fairly flexible to use, but it must be signed by both parties, and it must be supported by some contract. So your major contract on the services that person's providing, whatever it is you're buying from that party in America, India, Australia, wherever, it's got to be supported by a valid contract. You can't just get them to sign SCCs and that's it. The SCC should support that main contract. And that's where you might want some legal advice to make sure that one reflects the other and works with the other, and there's no conflicts or anything like that. It shouldn't do, but you never know in this day and age. So it's just worth making sure that you've got. The other way is by BCRs, and for a lot of you, you're probably never going to go anywhere near them. They're very expensive and they take a very long time to get approved. But there are, so again, on the ICO's website, there are a list of companies that have them. So if you do want to buy goods and services from, for example, Ernst & Young, EY, one of the big consultancy firms, then they've got binding corporate rules. They have them approved. Therefore, you as the customer don't need to do anything other than make sure you've got a valid contract with them, because they've already done the work. They've already said, EY India, you sign this contract that's been approved by all 28 member states. If all 28 member states are happy with it and they're happy with the framework, done. You as the end customer don't need to do anything. You just need to make sure that you're aware of the rules and that you're happy with them. And that's it. So while it's incredibly useful, especially for you as the end customer, it takes a long time to get approved. And if you look at the full list again on the ICO's website, you'll notice there are only a handful of them that have been approved, because they do take a long time and they are quite costly. So, for example, when I was at Ford Credit, the bank side of Ford Motor Company, we looked at implementing these to help with our dealer data and customer data, because we had a big data center in Dearborn in the US. We spoke to all sorts of organizations that were going for it or had gone for it, and it was going to be a lot of money and take up a lot of time. About 3 to 4 years it takes to get them approved. But they are, once they are approved, they are incredibly useful. So if you do want to use a supplier that claims they've got them, check the ICO's website to make sure they're valid. And if they are, crack on. You don't need to do anything else. It's quite easy for you and quite useful for you. Now, where are we then with regards to Brexit and what's going on there? So in February 2020, the withdrawal agreement was signed and the transition period begun. So what the transition period said was, we are no longer a member of the EU, but we're in a period where we're kind of a quasi-member. We're not a full member, because we don't have elected MEPs anymore. We can't veto anything. We are no longer a part of the EU infrastructure. So the EU member states are now 27, not 28. But in order to ensure a smooth transition, we are in a transition period that says for the moment the laws directly apply, and we're subject to the legal statutes and whatever else that support those laws. But we will work, the British government will work to lift and shift those laws and implement frameworks so that come the end of the transition period, there are things in place to establish us as a full independent nation once more. Now, the UK created a piece of legislation back in February to edit the Data Protection Act to implement or lift and shift the GDPR into British law, and that was passed. The UK government announced a commitment to GDPR and data protection based on our history and the fact we've always led on it, even committed to supporting the Information Commissioner still being part of the EU Data Protection Board, and while they can't have a formal vote, they will still be a member. They'll input into discussions and influence certain things, and there'll be a strong relationship there. But then in the same breath, Michael Gove at the time announced a big commission that would go through what he defined as red tape and look to reduce it post-Brexit. One of the things that was put on that list of things for him to consider was data protection. Now that commission died quite quickly because some of the things that were on there were ridiculous and that were more UK-based pieces of law, not EU-based pieces of law. So, for example, the Health and Safety Act was put on there. That's very much a British piece of law. So it very quickly became muddled as to what the whole point was about and died out quite quickly. But many leaders of the Conservative Party have remained saying we want to get rid of red tape, EU-based regulations that make no sense, all those sorts of things, which has included on a certain time, especially from Priti Patel, the GDPR or data protection law. Now, that hasn't worked its way into any sort of formal plan or proposal, but there is a lot of political posturing about it. So from the 1st of January 2021, the UK GDPR will come into effect. So our pieces of law will no longer look at the EU version, we'll look at the UK version. And as I said to you before, the UK version is a like-for-like copy. It literally just takes the structure, the wording, the layout of the GDPR, removes anything that's EU specific, including wording. So rather than saying member state, it replaces it with the word United Kingdom, those sorts of things, so that we have our version of it. And it's basically our version. It's very, very similar. If there is a deal agreed, or if the UK government looks to extend, then that may well go past the 1st of January 2021. But at the moment, the law is written, so from the 1st of January 2021, it comes into effect, and it's then live. If no deal is signed, then the new GDPR is in effect. So there's UK GDPR, EU GDPR. The UK will be seen as a third country, so we'll automatically default to an unsafe location because that's just the way it works. And the UK then has to apply for adequacy status. Whereas if a deal is signed, that will all form part of the deal. So there'll be an interim decision to say, look, it's fine, carry on as you are. We might let you know if that changes. That's part of an international treaty. Whereas if we leave and no deal is signed, that means no treaty is signed. Therefore, legally, as far as the EU is concerned, it can't see the UK as anything other than a third country, because we no longer have a legally binding treaty as part of our membership with the EU, and we no longer, or we don't have a treaty in place as part of our exit, as part of the ongoing trade arrangement. Therefore, legally, it has to see us as a third country, not a non-entity, but not a member of the club and not someone they've got a formal arrangement with. Something else. Therefore, that's going to cause a few problems and disruptions. I'll talk more about that in a moment. At some point in January 2030, whatever, depending on politics and the way the world goes, they may well revise the Data Protection Act into an all-encompassing one, because at the moment it's a bit of a mess. There's bits here, bits there, bits everywhere. So in the future, they may well look to harmonise that, even if it's just restructuring it so that it makes more sense. Or they may change it completely. Who knows? That's very much an academic posturing sort of thing. So this is what you need to consider, and this is what you need to keep an eye on with regards to us getting a deal versus us getting not a deal. So regardless of whether we're going to get a deal or not, the UK has already implemented the Data Protection, Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulation Amendments, EU Exit Regulations 2019. Lovely piece of law. And what that does is basically implement the GDPR into British law. So it's now the UK version of the GDPR. So that's live. That's been approved. That got approved before the last election. That is as it should be. So from the 1st of January 2021, the UK GDPR goes into effect. If we get a deal, if we get things signed off, and if a deal is approved between now and then we'll have options. So the withdrawal deal itself, so the one that was already signed, that Boris renegotiated, that May started, Boris renegotiated, that was approved back in February 2020, that established the transition period, confirmed the final date for our membership full revocation, agreed that EU law applies, and outlines the final date by which we should reach an agreement. So that's currently in place today, right now. If we get a trade deal, our adequacy will form part of that deal. So in terms of you getting information from an EU member state, so from France, for example, coming here because you're offering goods and services to them, there should be no disruption. Because as far as the UK and the EU are concerned, what they've said is we've implemented GDPR in full. We agree that we'll look at this, but for the purposes of the time being, we'll see you as adequate. So there should be no disruption to what's gone on. So that's the ideal. That's the best place we can be, because there's less disruption, less things for you guys to do, less things to be worried about. They may even, as part of that trade deal or the right up to that trade deal, extend the transition period. So again, there's a longer period for, even though we've got our own version of the law by 1st of January 2021, the GDPR is still in effect. We're still seen as adequate. We've got more time to prepare. That's very much dependent on whether or not the UK government agrees to an extension or not, which at the moment is looking highly unlikely, just as a trade deal is looking highly unlikely. So, with us outside of the EU, GDPR no longer applies. So if we crash out, so we get no deal, the way it works is regardless, GDPR will still apply. So if you're offering goods and services into EU citizens, yes, you need to be aware of the UK GDPR, but you also are bound by the EU GDPR as well, because you're processing personal data on EU citizens. Therefore, you're bound by it. Just as America and Facebook and whatever else are all bound by it and have to comply with it, you will as well. So we just join the ranks with everyone else. So if anyone says to you, this is the EU being nasty to us, it's not. The way it works, as I said to you before, is we're either part of the club or we're not. There's no in between. And in fact, many members of the UK have argued that there should be no in between. So we're either in or out. And if we're out, then we join the club with everyone else. Therefore, the EU sees us as you're offering goods and services to our citizens, you are bound by our rules and standards. Simple. If you want to sell goods here, you abide by our rules. The UK becomes what's known as a third country and has to apply for adequacy status accordingly. Now, there are a number of things that could affect our ability to get adequacy. As I talked to you before, the European Commission will look at the rule of law, what laws are in place to both protect that data and harm that data, our legal structures, various other bits and pieces. And there are a number of things that are playing against that at the moment. There's politics, obviously, because politics plays a part in everything. But there's also, we've got something in the UK, it's known as the Snoopers Charter. That's just as bad as the American Surveillance Act, or Patriot Act as it's called. It's just as bad. So while yes, we're not as bad as the US because we do offer citizens right of redress, both the National Audit Office, the Cross-Parliamentary Committee, and various other organisations have all said the same thing, that our MI5, MI6 surveillance organisations are not following data protection laws. They're not putting things in place. They're not responding to citizens' concerns. They're not even responding to parliamentary concerns. And that, for all intents and purposes, they have gone a little bit rogue. They're not following the laws that Parliament have set in place. And both the NAO and various other parliamentary committees have all said the same thing. This has to change. So as far as an outsider looking in is concerned, there's massive problems with surveillance in the UK. We've got issues. Every single democratic country does surveillance, but those surveillance organisations are bound by the nation's laws. So if our own government have said that our own surveillance organisations are not following our laws, there are problems. And that's a big red flag. There's also been a lot of political posturing, laws put in place to attack the judiciary, water it down, restrict their access to certain things, stop there being a strong independent judiciary, change the rules within legal law setting. We've seen this week the noise and furore around the international or UK trade bill that in essence, or actually does, specifically break international law and go against the very deal that Boris signed. There have also been loads of attacks on legal aid, legal support, closing down the court service, various different things. And this is all in the public domain. You can go and find it. There's lots of, again, parliamentary committees that have said the same thing. The UN have issued various different opinions on this. The UK government have issued various different things on this. The Labour Party, even within the Conservative Party, they've even called this out as this is not on. So again, as an outsider looking in, there are some big areas of concern for the United Kingdom at the moment. There are lots of things that are questionable. Therefore, from the EU's point of view, as an organisation that has set standards on this already and has already looked at countries that are having the same sort of problems that we're having right now, like the United States, like India, like Australia, like various other countries, then they've already said no to them. So why would they say yes to us? It's it's hypocritical. Something to also consider as well is you might have heard knocking around some stories around Facebook being in trouble and that we can't send data to the US entities anymore. That's kind of partly true, but not the whole truth. So there was a case that an Austrian lawyer or an Austrian citizen who's also a trainee lawyer brought against Facebook Ireland and the Irish Data Protection Commissioner about Facebook. What he did was raise concerns that Facebook was transferring information to the United States and the US government was accessing that or had unfettered access to that. And he was making the case that that was unfair. As an EU citizen that's offered rights and civil liberties under things like the GDPR, Human Rights Act, other pieces of legislation that all member states have got, why would I then, or why should countries issue then a backdoor that meant that data could go to another nation's government and that government can do whatever it likes with it and you'd never know about it? So the Irish Commission at the time said, whoa, this is too big for me to answer, and referred it up to the European courts. They looked at it and agreed. And what they said was that at the moment, in order for you to get information to the United States, you have to use a program called Privacy Shield. That was agreed by the EU and the United States as a program that businesses in the United States could sign up to and certify against, and it was overseen by the Federal Trade Commission. Now, what they found was that because this program is not federal law, it's just a program, then federal law, the Patriot Act, overwrites it. So this framework doesn't actually protect data. It doesn't offer citizens the right of redress. And the Patriot Act says that foreign nationals, foreigners like us as UK citizens, have no rights of redress in the United States for any misuse of that data. So you can't stop the US government from accessing, you can't appeal it, you can't do anything that you could do over here. So over here, if you didn't agree with the police accessing or issuing you a warrant for a member of your staff's data, you could appeal it. You could go to court and challenge it. You could defend your staff or defend yourself. Whereas in the US, as far as they're concerned, as you're a foreign national, you don't have that right. So the US Patriot Act can access any data at any time and you would never know about it. So the European court struck it down and said, this is not on. This framework is just too weak. It doesn't offer the protections that the GDPR does. Therefore, you need to put something else in place. So if you're using Privacy Shield to send data to the US, so if you've got an IT provider that's there, you've got, I don't know, an analytics provider, whatever provider that's based in the US, and they say that they are Privacy Shield certified, then that transfer is now unlawful and you've got to put other things in place. The court didn't strike down the contracts, so the standard contracts I mentioned to you before, they didn't say they were unlawful, but what they did say is that you, person that's looking to send stuff to the United States or anywhere for that matter, if you want to use these contracts, if that country has a piece of law that could overwrite that contract, so invalidate it, then they become unlawful. So for example, I want to send information to India, and India say, we don't care about contracts, no members or our own law trumps that. So if we say we want it and you can't tell your customers that we've got access to it, like they do in China, for example, then they're unlawful. They're pointless. They mean absolutely nothing. They offer you no protections whatsoever. They don't protect the data that you're looking to store in that country. They are a waste of time. They are a waste of paper. So what the court has said is, well, why would you bother doing them? Why would we offer citizens all these rights and freedoms and protections over their data and then say we can send it, yeah, you can send it to India, don't worry about it, it's fine, when it completely goes against that? It's hypocritical. So the court quite rightly said, look, you can't do that and that. They're not compatible. They conflict with one another. You're being hypocritical. Therefore, if you're going to send data outside of the EU, you need to protect it. Either be that with technical standards, so encrypting it, for example, totally locking it down so that entity can't access it in any way, or legally via a contract, those sorts of things. There's lots of guidance on the ICO's website about what to do and what not to do. So if you do have some providers that are based in certain countries at the moment, then what the ICO has said is they're working on guidance and an approach at the moment, But what they've said is don't just ignore the problem. Work out what you've got and respond accordingly. So keep an eye on the ICO's website, ico.org.uk. There might also be some stuff that we publish through the Chamber of Commerce as well, to say, right, once the ICO has decided what the correct action should be and what they're going to do about enforcement, then you can determine whether or not what you've done is inappropriate or if you need to do anything at all. So what does this mean for you then? So all this is lovely, geeky, data-related stuff. But what does that actually mean on the ground in terms of what to consider, what to do, what to go away and worry about? So first of all, I would say find out what you've got. Find out where your data is going, what suppliers you're using. Because if, for example, you know that you use local suppliers that are storing data in the UK, your customers are all UK based, then for you, the changes to data protection that Brexit will bring mean absolutely nothing. You're not affected by it because you're not offering goods and services into the EU. You're not affected by it because you don't have EU or non-UK suppliers. For you, the world is rosy. So just crack on with what you're doing. Make sure you've implemented the principles. Jobs are good. Whereas if you know that you do have suppliers based either in the EU or outside, in the US, for example, and that you are, or instead you are offering goods and services into the EU, then there will be some things that you need to consider. Assume nothing. So several clients that I've been in to see, they've gone, oh, we don't have US providers. Really? So have you got, for example, are you using Office 365? Well, yes. Have you explicitly gone into the settings and chosen European located data servers? No. Right, well then you do them. The default position for Microsoft is that it can be used anywhere in the world unless you state otherwise. So if you state you want to keep it in the UK or in the EU, then they will set you up accordingly. Whereas if you don't, then you're on the bog standard service and it'll be anywhere in the world. So actually you do. And do you block certain systems, for example, Trello or any of the online free apps, Salesforce, those sorts of things? No. Right. Well, they store stuff based outside of the UK and the EU, so you do. So assume nothing. What the ICO has said is while they're being flexible with enforcement and they're willing to work with organisations, they won't throw you under the bus, for example. What they have said is that doing nothing, so ignoring the problem, will land you in trouble. So if the ICO, for example, finds that you've done nothing in this regard, you're not doing anything with regards to processing information on EU citizens, you're not doing anything with regards to stuff going to the US, you've got nothing in place, you've totally ignored the problem, then the ICO will throw you under the bus. Whereas at least if you've acknowledged the problem, you've scoped the problem, you've tried to put things in place, you've got an action plan, then even if something goes wrong and the ICO finds out you haven't done anything, or you're not where you should be, they'll offer you advice and guidance. They'll support you. They'll help you. They won't throw you under the bus. So if anyone says, I won't worry about that because GDPR goes away with Brexit, that is not the approach. That will land you in trouble. So don't. Step one, scope out what you've got. Where is your data going? Where is it coming from? Where is it stored? If you don't use any third-party providers at all to run your business, it's all in-house, you've got in-house IT, all those sorts of things, then your IT department can tell you straight away. We've got a data service down in, I don't know, Kent, wherever, or it's even on site. I know exactly where it is, and we don't use any external systems. It's all in-house. Marvelous. Means you don't have to worry about it. But you've looked at it, you've considered it, you've done the work. Okay, fine, done. That took me a day. IT confirmed this, I know that, right, I'll keep a record of that, job done. Don't need to worry about it. Whereas if you do have stuff stored elsewhere, then again, work out what those issues are and what your gaps are. Assess what the gaps are. What data is involved? Is it high level stuff? Is it basic stuff? So for example, you do, I don't know, shipping. You've got some information on EU residents, i.e. staff of your businesses that are based in the EU, low level data, really low impact. Therefore, for you, yes, there are gaps there, but it's not a major problem. Most of your customers will just say, well, let's make an edit to the contract. Done. Don't need to then worry about any more than that. It becomes more of a legalistic thing. Whereas if you've got lots of stuff, really sensitive stuff coming out of the EU, really sensitive stuff leaving the UK and going to somewhere like America or somewhere like that, then you've got problems. The more high volume it is, the more sensitive it is, the more the regulator will take interest in it, and the more looks as a you need to protect this stuff. This is stuff that can cause serious harm to you, the data controller, and serious harm to the data subjects concerned, be that staff or customers. Therefore, there's more of an expectation for you to do something with it and look after it accordingly. What sort of contracts have you got in place? What's your contractual position? Are you a small cog in a big provider? Therefore, all you can do is ask and see what happens, but keep a record of the fact you've asked. Are you actually in a position to dictate terms? Is it something that you've had historically in place, but you've never liked the provider and technically you want to get out of it? So is this your opportunity to go, look, we really do need to change providers here. It's been on the list of things to do for a while. This is now going to cause us loads of headaches and work. Do you know what? Now's the time. Let's change provider, get something local, probably a bit cheaper and a bit better, whatever. Is this the opportunity to actually change providers because you've been wanting to do it for a while? So when I say there, what do transfers mean to you? Is it worth all the aggro? Or is that provider providing with one little service, actually, John, we could do that in-house, get rid of it? Or is one member of staff or a couple of members of staff using Trello, for example, and you actually go, no, we can do that via Microsoft Teams. So you're not to use Trello anymore. I'm banning that because that's a load of problems. Whereas I know that my Teams database is basically you. I'll use that instead. It's just as good, does everything that you need to do, and it's integrated with all of my staff. So I don't need to buy additional licenses. It's already in place. So again, consider those things as well. What have individuals been told? So again, if it's quite legitimate that you want to send stuff to outside of the EU, the UK, that's absolutely fine. Again, the law doesn't stop you from doing that. It says yes with conditions. One of those conditions is you've told people that's what's going on. Because if, for example, someone says, well, I don't actually want my data stored in the US, I don't care what you put in place, I don't want it in the US, I'm going to take my products elsewhere, they have that right and freedom. They have, UK law and EU law, both gives them that freedom of choice. So if they don't care about it, fine, they'll use your service and no one cares. Whereas if they do care about it, and more people and organizations do, so it is becoming more and more of a thing, then they have the right freedom to go, sorry, not using you because of this, I'm going to go elsewhere. Fine. So you've got to tell them that's what you do, that's how you operate, that's part of the services you offer. Create a risk-based plan, because there will be small things that are small wins that you could just do and no one cares, or there could be big things that require a bit of an investment. Therefore, look at the risk. Is it worth doing it? Is it not? Is it something you've got to wait to do because it's going to take some money and you've got to save up funds? All those sorts of things. Risk assess it, work out what you've got, risk assess it, build a plan. That when you've got a plan, you've got something in place to show, I know I've got to deal with this, I can do it right now and I will, or I need to wait because I don't have the money, therefore I've got a plan in place for when I do have the money. And that's what the regulator is looking for. If you've just got nothing in place, then you're on the back foot, you can't defend yourself. Whereas if you've got a plan, you've got to look at a plan, you've got a time frame and a plan to save the funds or get the funds in to do whatever it might be, fine. Again, the ICO will not throw you under the bus for that. So be aware of that. The key thing is to take action. Make sure your contracts are in place with third parties. So if you don't think a contract's in place or you've bought a service and no contract was ever signed, then put one in place. For all sorts of reasons, that's a good idea. Not just data protection. Data protection is just one aspect of law that relies on a contract. There are loads of others. So for all sorts of reasons, this might be the opportunity to make sure your contracts with your suppliers, your third parties, are up to date and as they should be. So make sure they are in that place. If you are buying in or offering goods and services to either EU citizens or your businesses in the EU, organizations in the EU, and you'll be processing data on EU citizens, then again, make sure there are SCCs in place. Your customers, so if you are offering goods and services to businesses, that includes processing EU citizen data, they may well start contacting you shortly to start saying, we're the controller here, so we're the one responsible for this data. You are in the UK, and it looks like you're going to become a third party very soon, or a third country very soon. I need you to sign this. So if you want to be proactive and anticipate that and be helpful to them, do it sooner rather than later. If you're content to wait and just see what they send you, do that instead. But either way, work out what you've got and agree an approach. If you're sending stuff outside of the UK, then again, find out where it is. If it's in a safe country, just make sure you've got a contract in place. If it's in an unsafe country, then make sure you've put that standard contract template in place. And again, 9 times out of 10, you're what's known as the data controller. You're in charge. They are your provider. So if you want to say, look, the law is changing, I need you to now sign this, that is your right and freedom under your contract. If you have no contract, again, coming back to the point about why contracts are so important, then you're going to have a bit of a battle on your hands. Because as far as the law is concerned, there is nothing legal in place to protect you or give you the right to change that arrangement, because there is no arrangement. Therefore, you're going to enter battle. So for all sorts of reasons, it's really important your providers are bound by a contract, and that you as a provider are bound by a contract, because it protects both you and them. So key things to remember is, first of all, GDPR does not go away after Brexit. It's very much here to stay. And if you want to write these down, the 7 basic rules for using personal data, and they are so basic and so simple, I have them on my mug. Very simple. Number 1, or principle number 1, is that you've got to be fair with your use of it. You've got to be honest with your use with it. So you've got to tell people what you're doing with it, and what you're doing should be lawful, should be legal. So if you just write down, be fair, honest, and legal. Rule number 1, be fair, honest, and legal. Principle number 2, limit its use. So we saw this with the COVID-19 stuff, where pubs and restaurants were asked to collect in customer contact details now, and members of staff, not all, but some, were then taking that data and contacting them and say, hi, I saw you, do you want to go for a drink? That is inappropriate reuse. Or some organizations were using them to then send marketing to them. That is inappropriate reuse. You've got it for a legal reason. You can't then use it as a marketing database. Just because you got it for one thing does not mean you can use it for another. So principle number 2, limit its use. Principle number 3, don't be creepy. Don't ask for anything you don't need. So if you need it, fine. And it's justified, it follows the other principles, fine. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Whereas if you're asking stuff that delves into the realms of, yes, but wouldn't it be fascinating to know? So for example, before lockdown, I used to travel around quite a lot because I serve clients all over the United Kingdom, Ireland, and the Isle of Man. Often when in provision of Wi-Fi, they would ask me for my gender. Why? Name, email address, age, I get, because you're setting up an account to use Wi-Fi. It's got to be, you've got to be over 18, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I get that. Gender? Why did you tell that exactly? Because one day I tested it. I even checked to see whether, could I access different websites, being a male, female, or other? Could I get different internet speeds, being male, female, or other? All those sorts of things. Nope, no difference across all of them. So why on earth, other than being nosy, does some bod need to know why there is a woman using the Wi-Fi at any given point? It is creepy. So always ask yourself the question when you're creating your forms and whatever else, do I need this stuff? Do I need to know this person's inside leg measurement in order to provide them with a pizza? No. Always challenge that. Keep what you get to a minimum. That way then, again, if you're exposed as part of a cybersecurity breach, and if you've ever attended any of the cybersecurity training at the chamber offices, they'll say the same thing, is that the less you've got, the less exposure you have. So only use what you need. Keep it to a minimum. Don't be creepy. Principle number 4, keep it accurate. So you're interested in good quality data on your customers, so are they. So keep it accurate. Put things in place to keep Mrs. Jones at number 71 Duke Street, Mrs. Jones at number 71 Duke Street, and all those sorts of things. Number 5, don't hoard it. Because again, if you don't need it, you've got it for no real reason, and you are compromised for whatever reason, that's more things to beat you over the head with. So get rid of it. It's taking up space, time, money. Get rid of it. Number 6, keep it secure. Look after it. And number 7, be a grown-up about it. Every single area of business regulation, even in other countries where they have more loose regulations, the default position is you are guilty until proven innocent. So in criminal law, you're innocent until proven guilty, but with business regulation or regulations, industry regulations, the default position is you're guilty until proven innocent. Prove to me that this is a genuine fluke. Prove to me that this is beyond your control. This was something that you couldn't reasonably have avoided. Whereas if you can't prove that, and it's something that you could have avoided simply by doing X or Y or Z, then you're at fault. You could have stopped this from happening, and you didn't. So data protection just follows every other area of regulation, saying you're innocent until you're guilty until proven innocent. So 7 basic principles: be fair, honest, and legal. Limit its use. Don't be creepy. Be accurate about it. Don't hoard it. Keep it secure, and be a grown-up about it. Pretty much common sense. And many of those you're very interested in. So good quality data, you're very interested in. You want to do that in order to offer good products and services. So actually, the principles aren't that far away from what you want to do in the first place. So remember them, train people on them, promote them, and you'll find that things start to improve, and your understanding and appreciation of data, not just personal data, any data, starts to improve with it. So step 1, scope out the problem. There's lots of legalistic bits to this and a lot of academic discussion about this, but practically scope out the problem. Find out what's going on within your own organization. What suppliers have you got? What transfers are you doing? What does this problem look like for you? And all of you will be different because you've all got different providers, you've all got different data, you're all offering different goods and services. Therefore, what works for Emma might not necessarily work for Caroline's organization and vice versa. So don't take what someone else is doing and apply it to yours. Look at you first. Inward look first. What am I doing? What would meet any of these problems? What is the problem? Then determine what those gaps are, assess those gaps, and come up with a plan. If you can move to standard contract clauses where you can and support your contracts and make sure those contracts are up to date, do so. If you can move to UK-based suppliers, do so. Again, look at your organization, look at what solutions work for you, and respond accordingly, action accordingly. Keep a very close eye out for any further developments. And again, at the Chamber, we've been producing some guidance, some articles, some resources to help you. So on the Chamber's website, there's an entire area around the UK transition where there are various pieces of guidance and support. One of those areas entirely focuses on data protection and gives you access to resources, which includes an action plan and template checklist from the British Chambers of Commerce, the ICO's guidance on Brexit and data protection, as well as guidance that we've produced for the Chamber as well. So there's a wealth of resources out there for you. We may well do another session like this again in the future. So if things radically change, we do get a trade deal, or we don't, and things really go south for the winter, then we may well do another one to update everyone on what's actually gone on and what the revised guidance might be. For the moment, this guidance is the most practical and simple that's out there. So there's a wealth of stuff available to you. And again, if you think there is something that's missing, something that you've come across that would really help you out, then again, do let us know. At the Chamber, I'm quite grateful of my relationship with the Chamber. So we're determined to find things and find practical solutions that support local businesses. So if there is something that you think would really benefit you, that's not part of the current range of resources, again, do let us know. More than happy to look at it, more than happy to see if we can come up with something to see what's what. That's everything that's going on with regards to data protection and Brexit. If you want to know, so a couple of you people have already said that you would like to know what actually the basic requirements of data protection are. I'm talking to the Chamber about revising our basics course. So for Chamber members, we're looking at running a series of webinars that you can send staff on that will train people on the basics. So if you want to say, yes, my staff have been trained on data protection, then one of your benefits of membership of the Chamber is that you can send them on a webinar like this, and they can show that they've been trained on the basics of data protection and things to consider. So keep an eye out for that. That will be coming in the next couple of months or so. Any other questions on anything we've covered today? If there is, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. If not, plop it in the little chat box and I'll respond to it there accordingly. Any questions? Anything that's unclear or you'd like further clarification on? Comment, speculation, compliment, anything at all, plop it in the chat box or unmute yourself. Caroline's asked a question. Is there anything I need to assure if I'm using a supplier in China? Right. So the UK government have produced a lot of guidance on using suppliers in China. If there is no personal data going between you and China at all, you're just buying products from them and that's it. No personal data in scope at all, then no, not really. Because again, GDPR only applies or data protection only applies when there's personal data and that's it. So if there's nothing at all, very little you need to do. If you are storing your customer data, your staff data with a supplier in China, then yes, there's lots of things you need to consider, including whether or not it's even lawful to send it there. China has a lot of, so if you think the stuff we've been talking about America was bad, China is 10 times worse. They kind of accept that the moment data enters their territory, it's fair game for anything. And they are under no illusions that they don't need to tell you a thing. Therefore, you may never know that the Chinese government has ever accessed that data. So if you want to, for example, encrypt it, so again, this will be based on what your supplier is doing. So if the supplier has no need to access it at all, they're just hosting it. Then if you want to encrypt it at rest so that the Chinese entity can't access it technically at all, that would be an option. You could legally bind them for a contract, but that's risky. It very much depends on what the Chinese entity is doing and what they've got access to. The more they do and the more they've got access to in terms of personal data, the more problems you've got. Whereas the less they do and the less access they've got, the less problems you've got. So start with what they're doing for you and have a look from there. If you want to see an example of how privacy intrusive China are, read the Foreign and Commonwealth Office guidance on going to China. You pretty much have no idea. You pretty much have no expectation of any privacy whatsoever. I mean, the Chinese government can access what they like. So they send our goods to a customer of ours in New Zealand. Okay, so they are basically processing information on New Zealand residents. I would say your risk is fairly low because it's just information on New Zealand-based residents, and they are a processor based in China handling New Zealand-based residents' data. So I would probably say in terms of GDPR, the issues are quite minimal. You probably want to make sure there's a decent contract in place and that they have security and all those sorts of things. But in terms of stopping you, no. But what I would look at is in the New Zealand law, because if New Zealand law says you've got to do something or bans New Zealand citizen data from going to China, as an example, then you've got problems. Whereas if it doesn't, and it's very similar to the GDPR, then just follow the GDPR and you're fine. But the only headaches I could probably see that you might have would be from New Zealand, because they do have a law on data protection. I'm not that familiar with it. I touched it briefly when I was at Ford, but that was about 6-7 years ago, so I've not touched it since. So your main problem would be New Zealand more than what it would be for GDPR, to be honest. Favor says, all of our web-based services are hosted in the UK, okay, with Azure Cloud. What should we consider, especially in light of the case that we've mentioned about your US Privacy Shield is invalid, or because they cloud? Because it's UK-based cloud, you're fine. So I suppose the first question would be for you, Viva, would be, who are your customers? If they're UK-based customers, so technically it's a UK to UK internal transfer, it's not going anywhere, then no major issues for you. Just offer your customers the usual things around, providing security, certifications, that sort of stuff, and it's fine. Internationally, you don't have to worry about it. Whereas if you're offering goods and services to EU-based citizens, then you may well find that you will have the same sort of problems as the US Privacy Shield framework, and that your customers, so the people that are buying your services from you, may well expect you to sign things like standard model contract clauses and those sorts of things. So a counter question to your question, Vava, would be, who are your customers? If they're UK-based, no major problems. If they are EU-based, you will need to prepare and have as part of your standard terms, if you have it, SCCs as an option. It's also worth, so you might have seen in the press things like where Apple, they stand against and specifically do not honor requests from the NSA. And they encrypt a lot of their data and store a lot of the encryption keys outside of the US, so the NSA can't access it. So it could be, if you are offering goods and services to EU citizens and you fundamentally disagree with the UK's right to access that data and gag you, essentially, so you can't tell your customers that you've basically handed over their database to the UK government, then again, you could do the similar sort of thing. You could encrypt it at rest so that technically speaking, you and the UK government can't do a thing. That's an option. Again, that's more of a political stance than anything else, but it's something that when you're looking at a risk assessment, you and your executive should have a position on. What's your position on it? And having no position at all is still a position. So explore it, decide what you want to do, what issues that presents for you, and agree a plan forward on what you want to do. Again, there is no right or wrong answer. Just look at it and determine a way forward. Any other questions? Anything, for example, from either you, Emma, or Michelle? Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. I'm glad that was useful for you. Brilliant. Thanks, Emma. Marvelous. So as I say, I'll send you a PDF copy of the presentation so you've got it for your records. I'll also, once I've edited the video, I'll upload the video to give you a URL so you can access it. So if you do want to go over anything and revisit what we've covered via the video recording, again, you are more than welcome to. Otherwise, I'll say thank you very much. There will be a little feedback form that will be automatically sent to you as part of your thank you for coming. There'll also be a little certificate to confirm your attendance. So if you do want to use that as part of your own professional development evidence, then you've got a little certificate of proof of attendance as well. Otherwise, I'll say thank you very much. All the best. I hope to see you on a future Chambers event in the future. Thank you very much.